In any house, baby's first steps alone are a big occasion, a landmark to be celebrated and remembered. And if the parents have paid close attention, they will have observed other landmarks in their infant's development. Skills such as sitting, standing, and walking unfold in a regular, largely preordained pattern.
Good nutrition, health care, and a nurturing environment all help ensure that motor skills develop according to the child's own timetable. Each child is unique and will acquire motor skills at his or her own individual rate.
Factors such as heredity and culture can influence this. Landmarks of development, such as rolling over, sitting up, crawling, standing, and walking, are useful as a guide to which skill the child will accomplish next. But do not predict when each will happen. The initial stirring of motor growth and locomotion begin in the first few weeks of life. Muscle control starts at the top and moves downwards in an orderly and unvarying sequence. The lifting of the head is the first sign. Then, during the second and third months, as neck and shoulder muscles get stronger, up comes the chest. About this time, too, by kicking their arms and legs, many infants are able to move from one end of their world to the other. Shortly after this, they master the art of rolling. With this increased mobility, the child's ever-changing world becomes more stimulating and potentially more hazardous. Sometime between 3 and 4 months, as control continues its downward pattern and back and hip muscles develop, an infant can sit upright, but must be held or propped up in this position. Sitting alone usually happens between 6 and 8 months, with a helping hand to maintain balance. By the end of this 6 to 8 month period, many infants get the hang of it all by themselves and can stay up for 10 minutes or longer. Now Maureen can see what's going on. Objects and people catch her eye and make contact. After this achievement, infants begin to satisfy their urge to explore by crawling. By anywhere between 7 and 9 months, the muscles of the arms and legs have grown strong enough to support the body's weight. And they learn to crawl in a variety of highly individual styles. Whatever style of locomotion they prefer, crawling is a freewheeling affair at this age. However, crawling is the one milestone that some babies may miss out entirely, progressing from sitting to standing. The ability to stand comes later than sitting or crawling. Babies cannot control their legs until they have developed control over their backs and hips. But they do like to practice from a fairly young age, and some babies, as early as 5 months, can start to push up while standing on the adult's lap. Babies as young as 8 months are nearly ready to stand. Soon, they are able to stand while holding on to a supportive hand. And like Maurice, by 9 months, most babies can pull themselves up, holding on to the handiest piece of furniture. As confidence increases, furniture and helping hands enable the infant to move quickly around his world. Standing and walking depend upon the baby's confidence and motivation, as well as his muscle coordination. Learning to walk alone is a major landmark. Some infants will walk alone as early as 9 months, others not until 15 months or more, the average being around 12 to 13 months. Each child will achieve mastery in his or her own time. The development of locomotion we have seen so far illustrates the principle of the head-to-tail direction of growth. As we saw, muscle control starts with the head and moves gradually downward. In other words, motor development follows a set pattern. Child will support head, lift chest, roll, sit, crawl, stand, and walk. As these muscles have been developing, so have the eye, arm, and hand muscles. Although newborn infants appear to be able to grasp, it is simply a reflex action. For the first 3 months, the baby's contact is mainly visual, and long periods of time are spent gazing at an object. Soon after birth, they begin to follow objects which come into their field of vision.
Oh, looky there. It's green.
Practicing
yellow.
at focusing is a good exercise.
Look at that.
The best focusing distance being 8 to 10 inches, which includes the distance of a baby being fed by the parent. By 2 months, the infant will begin to swipe at objects. But the arm muscles have not developed sufficiently to be under control. At this stage, the baby needs plenty of practice in estimating by eye the distance between his hands and the object he wants. By 4 months, the infant can stretch his arm in the general direction of an object. Watch Ian hesitating, as he is trying to make up his mind what to do. Because he wants to touch, not just hit things, swinging objects become less suitable. By around 5 months, a baby can focus at almost any distance, can keep his eyes on target, and reach for an object directly. This gradual attainment of visually guided reach illustrates the principle that growth proceeds from midline to extremity. At first, the shoulders control the arm movements. Gradually, as brain and muscles develop, the arm, elbow, and hand come under the child's control. Nicholas, at 7 months, uses the whole hand or palm to scoop things up. Refinement of the ability to grasp continues during the 7th to 9th months. By 9 months, many infants begin to indicate hand preference. Hand-eye coordination improves to the point where the child can use thumb and forefinger in opposition. They learn to examine touch, squeeze, rub, taste, shake, and otherwise handle anything within reach. Between 7 and 9 months, Jamie has also learned to drop objects on purpose. By 13 months, 2 blocks can be handled simultaneously. And the ability to pick up small objects with thumb and finger is as skillful as an adult's, illustrating the continuing development of eye-hand coordination. These last developments illustrate the principle of general to specific and simple to complex. Maurice's ability to use thumb and forefinger instead of the whole hand grasp in turn enables him to master the skill of self-feeding. The first tooth may erupt as early as 5 months or as late as 11 months. The average is 7 months. It is important to note that infants do not develop at exactly the same rate. Late developers are not necessarily slower in mental development, and early developers are not necessarily brighter. The norms or average ages for the appearance of developmental landmarks are based on scales devised by child psychologists and pediatricians. But some caution should be kept in mind. These norms are only approximate guidelines. Many infants will achieve a certain growth or developmental level earlier than the norm, and many will achieve it later. All can be normal. If the child is on the slower side of these norms, professional help should be sought. It is important to recognize that norms or average ages may vary widely, but the developmental sequences remain relatively unvaried.
The unfolding of these physical skills can be influenced by health, nutrition, and prenatal experience, including drug and alcohol use. What happens after the baby is born influences development as well. Certain child care practices related to beliefs about what's good for babies influence the unfolding of the landmarks of physical development. Take rolling, for example. If it is believed that babies should never be put down on their stomachs, the first roll will be from back to stomach, not the reverse. Babies who spend their early months on their backs often use rolling over and over as a means to get from one place to another before they learn to crawl. Some people believe that physical skills develop naturally on their own when babies are given space and the opportunity to move freely, but aren't helped into positions that they can't get into by themselves. The average age at which landmarks occur can be misleading because of the population on whom the norms are based. Most child development research in the past has been done on white, middle-class Euro-Americans, and the growth charts reflect that fact. We don't know yet what the true norms are for the diverse population of this country.
By the end of the first year, certain landmark changes can be observed in the infant's physical growth. The body gradually starts to catch up in proportion to size of the head. The average baby will approximately double its birth weight by the 6th month and triple it by 1 year. And the infant's height at 1 year shows a gain of approximately 9 to 10 inches over birth height. Height and weight rise in a consistent relationship to each other. Now let's consider the matter of feeding. Infants are either bottle-fed or breastfed, depending on culture or maternal preference and health. Individual infants have individual hunger needs. But by 3 or 4 months, most infants have settled down to a predictable schedule, which is different for each child. Regardless of which nursing method is used, infants are weaned from bottle or breast sooner or later. Weaning in this country is usually not done before 9 months, but some may continue with a bottle for several more years. Culture, health, and other factors, such as being a working mother, determine the age of weaning and the method used. For example, working mothers may prefer to bottle feed rather than breastfeed, or may stop breastfeeding earlier. The appearance of baby's first teeth and the ability to bite provide some nursing mothers with the motivation to wean, while other mothers continue to nurse successfully well beyond this point. Mothers who breastfeed usually delay introducing solid foods until the child is 5 or 6 months old. And larger babies may begin to need more nourishment than that available in their milk diet. Cultural patterns also influence how long babies are nursed.
Weaning comes earlier or later, depending on the culture, the food supply, circumstances such as a new pregnancy, or even just parental inclination. Some cultures continue to breastfeed beyond infancy, and some even beyond toddlerhood.
Whenever weaning occurs, gradualism is the key to successful weaning. It avoids upsetting the infant and encourages growth towards mastery. As weaning progresses and milk intake decreases, infants begin to need more solid food for energy and growth. However, the introduction of solid food varies with the individual child. Most pediatricians feel that the infant's digestive system is too immature to handle solid foods until 4 to 6 months of age. Also, the baby must have developed sufficiently to hold up his head, to push food to the back of his mouth, and to swallow. Between 7 and 9 months, infants will try to feed themselves. Mealtime becomes a time for sensory experiences, as well as a time for satisfying nutritional needs. It is indeed a messy time. But if parents have enough patience, the child will get enough to eat while learning to feed himself. And gain a store of sensory experiences. Between 10 and 12 months, infants may indicate food preferences. They insist on feeding themselves and may resist being fed if a parent interferes too much. Parents can avoid feeding problems by maintaining a relaxed attitude and responding to the baby's signals when he's had enough.
Self-feeding of solid food appears much later in some cultures than in others. Caregivers may discourage self-feeding until the 3rd or 4th year, or even later, because they consider self-help skills less important than teaching the child the lessons of mutual dependence. In these cultures, independence is not a value.
Sleeping patterns can also vary widely. Some babies will sleep for long hours, and others will be comparatively wakeful. Parents often expect babies to sleep more than they need to. Most newborns sleep for 16 to 17 hours, but during the first year, the number of hours the baby spends sleeping will drop. Eventually, a pattern of sleeping through the night with additional daytime naps is established. In young infants, there is a strong connection between sleeping and eating, but later on this connection becomes weaker. At 6 months, a baby will still sleep when he needs to. But as he grows older, the infant becomes more able to keep himself awake. It is around this age that sleeping problems can begin. Illness or emotional upsets may disrupt sleep patterns. Some infants are more easily disturbed by noise, while others can sleep through the roar of traffic.
Sleeping problems, getting babies to sleep, keeping them in their own cribs, and spending a peaceful night unbroken by crying or feeding, are connected to the cultural practice of teaching infants to sleep alone. This practice relates to the value of independence. Sleep problems don't occur in the same way in cultures where babies are always on or near the body of someone else and spend their days and nights eating and sleeping according to their own rhythms rather than to parental needs and schedules.